So going off script, let's talk about some things like what is best practices to negotiate? Like if somebody's buying a seller, because I know there's earnest money. Sometimes you can
Oh
negotiate
yeah.
different fees and stuff like that. So, what from a negotiation standpoint, what are some things that can be negotiated or at the very least looked at when purchasing a home from somebody?
Let me break down what the buyers are responsible for when it comes to buying a house. I think that really helps. Let's start with number one. With this new settlement from the National Association of Realtors, what has happened is, and this we didn't speak on this enough, but we need to. People used to say, "Hire me as your buyer's agent. My services are free." And now with this new lawsuit, the services were never free. The sellers actually did a lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors saying, listen, when we sell our property, we're paying for seller agent representation. So when a buyer is in the field looking to buy a property, they should pay for their own buyer agent representation. So now you are responsible for the compensation of your buyer's agent unless your buyer's agent can negotiate it from the seller. We no longer advertise or market. Like when I list a property, I'll say, well, I'm going to pay a buyer's agent this percentage in order to bring me a buyer. We can no longer negotiate that. So you're responsible for that. And typically that fee can be up to 3%. So how do you negotiate? You let a buyer's agent know, listen, I'm only willing to pay you whatever that percentage is. And you sign a buyer compensation agreement agreeing to that price, but also they are going to advocate for the seller to pay their compensation. So that's going to be the first thing that you need to actually negotiate. Secondly, you can save money. I personally don't feel like you should. Your energy is best used and is in negotiating the seller to contribute to your closing cost. When you're thinking about earnest money is actually applied to your bottom line numbers when you get to the closing table. So if you want to win an offer and you're like, listen, as long as I have an agent that I trust, and I can just say this, I have never lost a client's earnest money. I know the dates, I know the timelines, I know the rules.
So
So you put me,
this happened with Jada. You familiar with this?
I know exactly.
So
Let me be as vague as possible, and I
well, no,
can't I
because
can't be messy in Atlanta. That was not my deal, but I can tell you what happened.
I'm saying, well, she said it publicly. That's why I'm speaking about it.
I know. Let me tell you what happened.
All right.
What happens is this: there's contingencies to the contract. So when you saw that Jada lost her earnest money and she didn't want to move into the property, there are contingencies. So a contingency is the timeline that you have to meet that all parties can use to get out of the contract, specifically the buyer. So when you submit $25,000 in earnest money let's just say for a contract, you have a couple contingencies. One, you have your due diligence period. A due diligence period in the state of Georgia, and most other states do have this, is your time period to inspect the property and negotiate repairs prior to moving on to the next contingency. So if you have a 14-day due diligence, within that 14 days in the state of Georgia, again, keeping up, and other states do have this too, if you get a home inspection, you get a roof inspection, and you come back and say, hey, seller, I did not like this inspection. I want you to make these corrections prior to closing. And your agent puts down those corrections. If the seller does not agree to it, you can terminate your contract within that due diligence period and get your money back. Once you pass the due diligence period, then you have the financing contingency and the appraisal contingency. The financing contingency is the time period that the lender has to provide a letter of commitment to the loan. So when you first get your mortgage approval letter, that's an approval. But they have to now take the actual binding contract that you signed, and now they start submitting that binding contract along with all your other documents to an underwriter. And an underwriter will come back and say, this is a letter of commitment. We are committed to actually funding this property. Then you have your third one, which is your appraisal contingency. And we spoke on that. So in that appraisal contingency, if the home does not appraise at value, then your agent needs to do an amendment to reduce the purchase price. The seller does not, let me say this again, the seller does not have to agree to reduce the price. They do not. So if you paid for a home inspection and you paid for the appraisal and the seller say, I don't care what your appraisal said, my home appraised at this value, you can terminate the contract and you can get your earnest money back, but all the other expenses that you spent to purchase the property, you will not get refunded to you. So in the case of Jada, I think it was a little bit of buyer's remorse, probably when she was under contract to purchase a property. And I think it was like thinking about the exposure, of buying that property. I don't think that, I think it, this is what happens when you buy a property. You need to work with an experienced agent that understands how to protect your privacy. So you should, if you are a celebrity or a semi-celebrity, we have this issue all the time. And I hate to say it, especially when you guys are working with us and we're very social on social media, people, and that's how we get our business. But when you're protecting the best interests of your clients, the number one thing they should be doing is purchasing the home in the name of an anonymous LLC, or they should also be buying it in the name of a trust. And then the second layer that you need to add, I have closed plenty of deals that y'all know about that nobody else will ever find. Get it out of my name, because anything that I sell is public knowledge. So what I do is I don't close the deals under my name. I close it under the name of the other agent on the other end. So when someone comes to my page and try to see who she worked with, they can't find it, and you can't find them. And I think she had an issue with her privacy being exposed. She was afraid of actually closing on that property because she is a single woman in Atlanta. And I don't think that she felt comfortable. So she passed all of her contingencies. So she should have made that decision for the state of Georgia, within her due diligence period. You can terminate for any reason. You can wake up and say, I just decided I don't want this house, and you get your earnest money back. It doesn't have to be a reason in the state of Georgia. She passed that contingency, then she changed her mind. And her agent should have explained that to her. Like I always explain, as soon as your due diligence period comes, the day before you get an email, this is the last day to terminate. Do you still want this house? My team calls, do you still want this house? Otherwise, when you pass this one contingency, the only way out of the contract is what? Financing or appraisal. So she passed the contingency and she changed her mind, and that's okay. But you got to do that within your due diligence period. That's why it's important to take your time when buying. And also, if you are a public figure, take the time to make sure the person that's representing you understands how to protect you. Because I got to just say this, as a minority business in Atlanta, I see it happen so often. We're popular. I'm popular. And then I work with other popular people. And there's so many other people that are minorities too. We want to get the luxury business, right? But we can't put them out there. We got to be comfortable with our names being in the rooms instead of our blasting their addresses and their personal information all over social media, which is probably why she ended up having the remorse she did have. And she got out of that and she decided to terminate the contract because she wasn't comfortable. She did subsequently end up buying something after that, though. And I think they followed those rules and it made her more comfortable.